Hi, Gary. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Thanks for having me.
Okay, to start the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. So, you started your career in as a corporate sales director, and later on, you worked at IBM. And I want to talk about your first job. I think the first job was like with the Netflix founders, and it was like really interesting. And then we could definitely jump into that. I feel like some of the lessons that I've learned from your podcast interviews were you were a strong sales leader, but later on you got to lead a team of 20 and then you learned a lot of lessons there. Maybe we could start there. Like, what were some early career journey that kind of um, taught you a lot of stuff that you kind of find useful later on running Elance slash UpWork now and like also working as a partner at as a GP at Polaris?
Oh my gosh, there's so much in there. I don't even know where to start. But yeah, I started my tech career at a company called Pure Software. And I didn't start as a sales director. I started as a BDR, which is
Mhm.
essentially, business development rep. We called it a sales associate at the time and kind of worked my way up from, BDR to a sales rep to an account executive to, various roles. And then I ended up managing teams. And so, what was interesting about that experience is, a couple of valuable lessons. One, if you have a chance, it's better to pick a product that sells itself.
Mhm.
We had such a good product. I can tell you more about it, but essentially, if you put it in a software developer's hands, they didn't want to give it back. And so it was a great product to sell. And because developers loved it, and then of course CTOs and vice presidents of engineering loved it because it made their people more productive and effective. So that was probably lesson number one. Lesson number two was, um, I when I first graduated from college, I worked in manufacturing in a family business, and my grandfather used to say, "If you don't have it in your head, you have to have it in your feet."
Mhm.
And for me, I learned there that if you ran a little bit harder in
Mhm.
sales, sales is about frequency and competency.
Mhm.
How many dials, contacts, connects with potential clients can you have? And are you saying and doing the right things to help them? And
Mhm.
if those two things are added together, the result is sales. And so I found that it was an incredibly rewarding job because um, it's the ultimate in, put a dollar in, get a dollar 50 out. I mean, the harder you
Mhm.
work, the more you can sell, especially if you have a good product. So I would say that was one of the valuable lessons I got early in my sales career.
I wonder, so when you were talking about like picking a product that can sell itself, like how do you get introduced to like the Netflix founders and how did you like identify that which company to join back then?
Well, the company was called Pure Software, and I actually got that job because there was a woman that married a friend of mine from college, and she was the sales vice president. And so when I was living on the East Coast in manufacturing, I decided I wanted to get into tech because tech was an industry that was up and to the right. Manufacturing was an industry that was down and to the right. And so I launched a job search contacting everybody I knew, and she was kind enough to take a chance on me. I had no experience. I did not have a technical background, but she believed in me and thought I could sell and had open positions. And so I got a lucky break by leveraging my network, which I guess is another valuable lesson. It's
Mhm.
reach out to everybody you know. And a lot of times people will hire based on personal characteristics and motivation and not skill and knowledge, especially in entry level positions.
Mhm.
And so she took a chance on me, and I ended up, I don't think I let her down. So it turned out to be good for both of us.
For sure. Hi, Prikar. I want to say hi to the audience. Hi, Prikar. Hi, Muhammad. So like I wonder when it comes to like um thinking about your next step. So like I feel like I want to maybe we could start with one of your core like career milestone, which is like the CEO of oDesk, which eventually turned into UpWork, and then you were there for like over 8 years. Why don't we talk about like when you joined the company, what the company were like looking like, and then how do you kind of use your superpower, which is like sales, to help the company grow?
Yeah. So the company was super early in their journey. And, for those of you who don't know, oDesk is where I started. We had a competitor by the name of Elance. oDesk and Elance came together to create publicly traded company UpWork. And so I ran oDesk, which was a marketplace for talent. We helped people to hire, manage, and pay talent from around the world. And the way we did that was we enabled people to hire online talent exactly like they would offline. So, you know, most people get paid for their time, not the product. And so we replicated offline work online. And that was the premise of the business. So hire, manage, and pay remote talent. And when I started, the company wasn't sure what it wanted to be. There was sort of like an enterprise solution that was, you know, we will help you monitor your workforce. And then there was the service side, which was we will actually give you a worker that you then can monitor. And most people wanted to hire workers, not monitor their workforce. So the first thing was the company had to decide which way it was going to go, because there was no way it could do both. And so within the first 90 days of me joining, we picked that we were going to be a marketplace, not a managed service. And so we became a marketplace, and then we had to prioritize our product and modify all of our code in order to facilitate what the business is today, which is a marketplace. So that was the first 90 days of the business. And then once we decided, you know, there were about 20 people at the company, and we took the company down to 12 people. And the reason why is there were 8 people at the company that didn't believe marketplace was the right decision. And so I very quickly learned that you had to have people commit whether they agreed or not. Once a decision was made to move forward as marketplace business, if people don't commit, it can be really disruptive to the culture. So we had to sort of strip the house down to the studs before we could rebuild it. And so we went from 20 to 12 and then rebuilt as a marketplace, and then the rest is history.
I wonder, can you share a little bit more about, like, you know, who were your first client back then? So assuming they already have some sort of clients who is like focusing on the enterprise solution side, I guess, like, or like the enterprise, I guess. So how do you like kind of like quickly, you know, identify the first customer? And do you have to onboard the client first, or like, do you have to onboard the worker first?
Yeah, we were more constrained by clients than workers. So if we had jobs, we could connect, we could find all the workers we wanted. And in the early days, we were being really cautious about what workers we let into the system. So we had human interviewers who were basically interviewing every software developer to decide whether or not they were worthy of being on the platform. And we had 3 interviewers all around the world in our network. So that they were people that we hired from our own platform. But, you know, if you think about an interview lasted a half an hour, maybe they could do 10 a day, maybe 12 a day, times 3 was 36 developers a day that we could let into the marketplace. And we had thousands that wanted to get in. So we were constrained by our ability to, you know, get more workers in. And so that was a key decision. But your question about, I draw this picture all the time because I do a lot of coaching for different entrepreneurs, but I think your question is relevant to exactly this. So in the early days of our business, think of our business on 3 dimensions. We had a size of client. How big is the client? The x-axis, backwards, is what's the work type? So what kind of work? You know, think of software developer, marketing, sales help, translation, documentation, and tech writing. You know, that axis goes all the way out to lawyer, accountant, you know, whatever. And then the third axis down into the left here, the z-axis, was location of client and worker. Where was the client and where was the worker? Okay. So in the very early days, we were extra small clients. We were not an enterprise solution. The ideal customer for us was a startup who was constrained. They couldn't hire somebody local because they couldn't afford somebody local. And even if they could afford them, they were competing against the likes of Google and Facebook and Amazon and everybody else here in the Bay Area. The work type was technical. So specifically in the early days, it was LAMP, Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So that was it, right? And the third axis, location, the client was onshore and the worker was offshore. Why? Because that's where the most arbitrage existed. There were phenomenal workers offshore who were willing to work for lower prices. We had the capability to connect those workers to those clients and enable them to work as if they were in the same office. So in the very early days of our business, we were this tiny circle right here, small clients, technical workers offshore for onshore clients. That was the ideal fit for us. And if you look at the size of that market, that's like a $40 billion market. So you only have to be a small part of that market in order to have a big business. But our strategy from the beginning was to own the whole thing. So very similar to like Amazon started with books and eBay started with Beanie Babies and Pez dispensers. We had a very focused approach, which enables you to get the right talent and get the right clients and not have to apologize or not have the service that they wanted. Enterprise expected a different type of worker, indemnification, payroll, all kinds of things that we couldn't provide, where the small businesses were happy connecting and paying through our platform.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So, but like, okay, so you guys started with like the small businesses, but I feel like they are low volume, like I guess like high volume because there's a lot of small businesses, but like it could be like really low value as like because small businesses don't have like the budget to spend millions of dollars on the platform. So, like, how do you think about that?
It actually didn't matter. Like if you think about, like even Uber, Airbnb in the early days, it wasn't luxury houses. It was cheap. It was sleep on my couch, right? It was stay in my apartment while I'm there. It was more shared housing for Airbnb, and Uber was very local rides around the city, right? And so if you think about a marketplace business, you want to think about two things. What is the cost of the service?
Mm-hmm.
So you could have a marketplace for selling houses, cost extremely high. What is the volume? Selling a house very infrequently, once every 10 years, 7 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Uber ride, low cost, high volume. For our business, it actually was lower cost. The average hourly wage was like $17, which is low for a software developer, but the frequency was actually quite high. Once you hired somebody, the average assignment was like 3 months. And it was also very viral. Why? Because a lot of our clients said, I love this service. Do you have another developer? Do you have a friend? They would ask their coder if they had a friend. And then that guy would say, yeah, I have my friends are asking me where I'm making all this money. Of course, I have friends that would love to work for you as well. So clients were asking for more workers and workers were bringing workers. And then workers would bring clients. They might have another client online where they were worried about getting paid. So they would bring them onto our platform. And clients were bringing workers. They may have had workers that they found somewhere else working for them remotely that they wanted to pay through our guaranteed payment platform. So even though it was small clients, once we got them, they stuck for a long time. And there was cross virality, right? eBay was a great marketplace because sellers bought buyers, buyers bought sellers, sellers could be buyers, and buyers could be sellers. So you could buy a Beanie Baby in the morning and sell it in the afternoon for more money, and so you have to, in a marketplace business, you want to look for virality.
So what would be your like sales pitch to me if I'm like a startup founder, which I technically am? So if I'm a founder and then like you're saying like, hey, would you want to join our platform? Or like what would be the offering at the very beginning? What was your first kind of like pitch look like?
Well, I would tell you our elevator pitch was that we were the world's largest online workplace. We enabled you to hire, manage, and pay workers from around the world. And I would say, Grace, you're trying to hire people locally and you probably don't have enough people to get all the work done that you want to get done. And hiring people locally is expensive and it's time consuming. It takes 92 days on average. You're competing against all the big companies. And even if you hire that person, you're going to have to pay a lot to utilize them and get your money's worth out of that employee because you're paying a Bay Area salary here in the Bay Area. Well, what if you could leverage the internet to hire people remotely? and manage them as if they were in the same office and pay them significantly less. Why? Because they may be in Ohio or Pennsylvania or even offshore. And in some cases, you might not even need a full-time worker. You might need fractional work. Like you don't need a full-time PR person. You just need 10 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And you could hire somebody local for that. But again, you're going to pay Bay Area prices. So just like shopping online makes sense, as opposed to going to 5 stores, isn't working online. And I'm not saying all of your workers, Grace. I'm saying some of your workers. Would it make sense for, I don't know, let's say you had 100 employees. Would it make sense for like 2 of them to come to work remotely? Like 2 out of 100? Could you fractionalize that work and hire part of a marketing person and part of a coder and part of a Excel expert or whatever you need? And once people got their head around it, they tried it, they were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I should hire more workers this way.
I love that. I wonder, I mean, of course, now I hire probably everybody from my company actually on UpWork. But I wonder when at the very beginning, like how do you I guess like so how do you source the talent? Because of like I'm sure there's a lot of people apply, but like the one of the major challenge or like one of the major um important factors, like I feel like it's really hard to filter out like a ton of candidates. So like whenever I post a job on Upwork, even now, like I would get like, hundreds of people applying, and like, you have to go through like everybody's um resume. But like you can certainly filter out a lot of like the generic stuff very early on. Like if the person call you hi sir, it's probably not a good sign. But like how do you quickly filter out the person's ability on like doing the job?
Yeah, it's a great question. We struggled with this in the early days, the very early days. We had a woman by the name of Sandy in the back room who would look at a candidate, would talk to the client, and would actually hand match. So I call that hamsterware. You know what I mean? It's like we were hand matching. We realized that wasn't going to scale. And so we took the kayak approach. If you want to go travel, it's like, where do you want to go? I want to go from San Francisco to New York. Okay, here's all of the flights. I can go from San Francisco to New York. Okay, that's a lot of flights. And this one has 2 stops and this a layover in Chicago. And I don't want that. So you have a little filter over here where you can say, I only want nonstops. I only want to go in the morning. I don't want any red eyes. You can start to whittle your list down. And that's the approach that we took. Show everybody the universe and then help to whittle it down. And even that, I would say our clients faced your challenge, which I call paradox of choice. You post a job, you get 100 applicants, you interview a couple, and then you're like, ugh, forget it. I'm just going to pay somebody else to do this for me. It's like you tried in earnest to use the service, but it was too hard to get you started. And when I was running the business, we had about a little over 1/3 of the jobs started. So if you posted a job, only 36% would actually start, would pay us $1, right? Some would start and we wouldn't get paid, but 36% would start and pay $1. And if they started, they would stick for a long time. So one of our key metrics was, how do we get more starts, right? So even though we had this kayak approach of show you the world and then let you filter it down the way, we still had to sort the list in a way that we thought made sense. And whether or not it made sense, did it yield more starts? Because at the end of the day, that was the metric. And what we had a key insight. And the key insight was that even though we would sort the list, we were sorting the list based on we thought what clients wanted. Almost like Netflix shows you movies you want. Hey, you like this, you probably love that, right? So we were trying to do that. But what we quickly realized is not everybody wanted the same thing. Clients can optimize for 3 things: speed, quality, or price. You have a job and you want it done by Friday because you have something going out Friday and you need it done fast. And 80% quality is good enough. You just need like a base product and you're going to edit it and clean it up. So it doesn't even have to be that high a quality. And because you don't need that high quality, you want to pay a low price. So you might be willing to get it done in the Philippines for $8 an hour because it's good enough for what you need, right? Whereas some other clients might want very high quality, they don't need it for 3 months, and they're willing to take their time, right? So we had to ask clients, what do you want? What are you looking for? And once you tell me what you're looking for, I could actually show you different candidates. And so we tried to get a little bit more information about your preference without being too much, without asking for too much upfront, right? You don't want to be so like if Kayak did it the opposite and said, where do you want to go? When do you want to go? What time do you want to leave? How many people are traveling? You'd be like, oh, forget this. I'll just go to United. Like it's time to value, I call it. Like you want to have as little friction as possible to get somebody to the right candidate as quickly as possible. So UpWork would be doing their job if you posted a job and they had a best match algorithm that said, Grace, based on what we know about you and based on how you hire and based on the nature of this job, here are 3 candidates we think are good. And you say, oh my gosh, I'll hire any one of these 3. They're all good, right? That would be a best match and would minimize friction and have more starts.
I wonder, so how would you study like my preference? Like what would be the benchmark that or like metrics that you're using to be like, hey, this person hired, because I feel like the job function are very different too. Like if you're hiring a developer versus if you're hiring a designer, and also versus like if you are technical or non-technical, or let's say someone on your team that's doing the hiring for you. I feel like all of them probably have a lot of differences, like when it comes to like the algorithm recommending you someone. How do you kind of like having a universal play or like something that's simple enough the algorithm can detect versus something super tailored?
Well, recognize that in the early days, it was a lot of looking at the data, but we didn't have as much data. Today, the company
Right.
has so much data, because of all the jobs that have been posted and all the matches that have been made. And what are the words in a job description that have yielded a good result? What are the words and types of clients that have yielded a bad result, types of workers, quality of workers? So the company has so much information today that I feel they can leverage that data to make better matches. I'll give you an example. One key insight for us was minimize friction. So you want to hire somebody, you sit down to write a job and you say, okay, I want to hire a designer. And you're like, all right, where should I start? I want to hire a designer and I got to write this job post. Well, what if right there I could say, Grace, here are 3 different designer job posts that have been posted before. Do you want to replicate one of these job posts? You can still modify it a little bit, take out words, add things, but I'm going to give you 3 templates that are 3 types of designers to help you to like shorten that cycle so you're less likely to bounce at that point. And then rather than ask you 100 questions, maybe I could just ask you 3 questions like, hey, what's more important to you? Some clients hire designers, very high quality. They typically pay more than $50 an hour. Does that sound like you, Grace? Or are you more interested in the, paying a little bit less? So I don't have to say, what are you looking for? Speed, quality, and price. But I could actually ask you, right? And that was one of the things that was like, why don't we just ask them? Do you ever watch Seinfeld?
Yeah, I do.
And there's one where Kramer is the movie phone. The movie phone line gets directed to his apartment. And he's trying to like guess what the clients on the other end of the phone want. He's like, if you want to see Rochelle, press 1. He gets it. And at the end, he's like, why don't you just tell me what movie you want to see? And we kind of had that insight. It's like, why don't you just tell us what you want? And we'll give that to you. And that simple insight moved our start rate up significantly, right? So the time to value, you want to give the client as much value as you can in the short term. One other key insights we had was if people came in, they said, I'm looking for a PHP programmer, we could ask them a lot of questions. What we found is if they landed on PHP programmers at that point, they were more likely to start. We just started showing them PHP programmers to say, hey, here's what some look like. You want to post a job and hire one of these? And then they were like, yeah, I want to hire this guy. How do I hire this person? Right. And so that was another key insight. Just landing them on a page with talent before they even posted a job happened to improve job posts and starts.
I wonder, I think that's such a great insight to just like ask the client, but like how do you find the worker in the first place? Because I feel like that's another major challenge to find like the high quality one. Did you guys just do like posting on Craigslist or like what did you guys do before the pre
No,
Upwork era?
it was viral from the beginning. So in the early days, the very early days, we had about 100 workers on the platform who were all really good. Why? Because we had human interviewers and we had a very high bar.
Mhm.
And once we placed those people with clients, the clients were asking for more workers. Then we turned around to the workers and said, do you have more workers? And they were bringing their friends.
Okay.
Why? Because they loved the work. They were working for great clients. It was steady, long-term income. You never had to leave your house and you were making significantly more money. So like a key geography for us in the very early days was Moldova. And we just had virality in Moldova. Then what happened was we had this guy, Evgeny. And Evgeny was like, you could see his hourly rate went from $10 an hour to $35 an hour overnight. Why? Because he was so good, he could keep charging his clients more and they were willing to pay him because $35 an hour in the Bay Area was still a bargain. And then Evgeny was, going out with his friends and paying for the vodka shots and they were like, where are you getting all this money? We never see you leave your house anymore. You don't have to take the bus to work. You now have a car in your driveway. What is going on? What are you doing? And is it legal? And then their friends were saying, hey, can we work with you? So then he started getting more friends and posting them on UpWork as their agent. So he would say, Grace, how much do you want to make? You want to make $15 an hour? No problem. He would put them on oDesk at $20 an hour and keep $5 for himself. And they were happy to pay it because as far as they were concerned, Evgeny got them a job at 3 times more than they were used to. So we saw these agencies start to spring up. And so oDesk in the early days spawned a lot of these businesses that turned into be huge development shops because of our platform. We also had clients that hired thousands of workers. So like one of our early big clients was Thumbtack, who was hiring workers to populate, to find their providers, populate their database and get the system started. And there were many other businesses that used us in the early days and had thousands of workers on the platform. So we never really had to, it's almost like if Uber has drivers, riders will come. If eBay has Beanie Babies, buyers will come. Somebody told me once, you don't want to be in a marketplace where you have to recruit for both sides.
Wow, that's gold. I love that.
You want a market dynamic where if you bring one side, the other side will come. And the example that they used was a bar. And so a bar is trying to get people in to sell more drinks. Why do bars have ladies' nights?
To attract the rest of the population.
If all the ladies are drinking free, you think guys will pay to get in the bar? Of course they will, right? And so that's a really good lesson in market dynamics.
I wonder, so like, by the way, I want to say hi to the audience. Hi, Wazzer, and hi, LinkedIn user. So I think, honestly, we had a lot of like the prayer oDesk alumni on the show. So there were like the Charlotte, so she was the I think she was a CM. She was like she was in marketing basically, and then the other person was Matt from Skillshare.
Oh, Matt Cooper,
Yeah,
and
he was
Jaleh Bisharat.
Yeah. So I feel like they all like spill so super highly about like the oDesk experience back then, and I wonder when it comes to like training your own employees, how do you kind of like select the people to join your team, and what were the key functions that you feel like were like I guess like have to hire first versus later on?
Yeah, the first on key attributes of employees and creating a good culture, there's 2 elements that go into it. One is hiring the right people in the first place. And I think that people should hire on personal characteristics first. Who is the person? High integrity, smart, hardworking, creative, problem solver, great communicator, things that are hard to teach. I had a boss who said, you can teach a chicken to climb a tree, but you're better off getting a squirrel in the first place. So we would look for squirrels, right? People with the right personal characteristics. The next thing was the motivation. Why do they want this job over all the other things they could be doing? What's your motivation? What do you want out of this job and out of your career and out of life in general? And we would try and line up on characteristics and motivation. And then there's skill and knowledge, right? And you're not going to hire a CFO who isn't a CPA, right? Or you're better off getting somebody, all other things being equal, if somebody has domain expertise that's going to be helpful. That's the knowledge piece. So that's what we look for. And then in creating a good culture, what did we owe every employee? I think you owe employees 6 things. First and foremost, you owe them the opportunity to work with great people with the right personal characteristics. Nobody wants to work in an environment with somebody who has low integrity, right? Somebody's going to lie to get their way or lie to a client. So you owe that to employees. Work with great talent. Number 2, hopefully it's something they can get excited about. You can get up out of bed every morning and be excited about what you're doing. And the beauty about UpWork, formerly oDesk and Elance, was that we were providing opportunity around the world for talent and for companies. It was freedom. It was like buyers loved it. They felt smart for hiring great talent at a lower price. And talent loved it because they had now had access to jobs that they didn't have in their local community, even if it was Flint, Michigan. It didn't have to cross a border. So you got to love what you're doing. Third is impact. Are you making a difference, not only in your job, but are you in a position where you can make a difference in the world, right? Next is personal and professional growth and development. Are you going to be better off a year from now than you are today? Is your career path, does it look like this or does it look like this? And most people want it to look like this. If you want it to look like this, go work at a big company and hide out, right? The next thing is financial reward. Are you being paid fairly for the work that you're doing? And are you going to share in the upside if this company is successful? And so, if I look back at UpWork, at the peak, it was valued at $10 billion. It was a 60-something dollar stock price. And when I look at the people that we hired, we had 500 employees who had options at less than $1 for a stock that at its peak was $65. I feel really good about the opportunity and the impact, the personal and professional growth and development, and the financial reward that those people got for dedicating their services to the company. And then the last thing I call balance. And balance is sort of a catch-all for everything else that's important to you. Are you going to have time for, I don't know, your dog or your religion or your athletic pursuit, or you love to hike or travel or whatever outside of work? Is this job going to afford you that balance, or are you willing to sacrifice balance because it checks all the other boxes? And that criteria is defined and prioritized by each employee separately, but it's up to the manager and the leader to understand what is that criteria, or what are those criteria for your employees, and how do they prioritize them, and are they being met? So a conversation with Gillet or Matt may have gone, hey, look, I owe you these things. How do you feel about our aligning with how your criteria align? And if they're not aligned, you want more growth and development. Well, let me give you more responsibility. Let me give you a job that you don't have, right? And for some people where the criteria, if many of them are out of whack or not aligned, you should probably help them find another job, right? For their benefit.
For sure. How do you think about, let's say if the person that you have in place that wants to move to a higher position, but you have to but for the company, for the company's goal, like you don't have that higher position. Like, for example, I feel like a lot of people want to move up to leadership, but that's prior to, but like right now the company only need the person to do the work instead of like having 500 strategy sessions. How do you kind of like lead people when they have high ambition, but on the other hand, like, that like what the company need is like the most like amount of like just like getting stuff done, basically.
You have to make sure you're checking all of the other boxes,
Mhm.
right? So remember, there's 6 criteria, not just
Right.
one, which is, why do they want a promotion? Is it because they want more responsibility? Is it because they want the title? Is it because they're bored with their job and they're looking for something more interesting to do? Is it because they want to make more money? So you have to understand the motivation behind it. And so the first thing you could do is ask them,
Mhm.
what is it about that management title or job? And honestly, Grace, some people just want the title. And
Mhm.
titles only matter when you leave. At the end of the day, I don't care about the title. I care about what did you do at the previous company?
Mhm.
And did you move up, right? Or were you stagnant for all these years? But what you can do is you can give somebody more responsibility. If you're at a company, there's never a shortage of work. If there's a shortage of work or problem solving hard problems at a high rate of speed, you probably have too many employees. So there's always, because our company was always growing and growing significantly, there was always more problems to solve. And with Matt Cooper specifically, Matt was a fantastic problem solver.
Mhm.
Like if you gave him something to do, he would get it done. And he would get it done well. He was like a Six Sigma process expert. So he
Mhm.
would build it, he would put a process around it, he would figure out a way to do it. And so I gave Matt a lot of problems to solve because he was so good at solving problems. So I think Matt would say, of course, he wanted to be promoted to higher positions. But what I gave Matt was a foundation to be an effective CEO today because he solved so many problems. He had done the job before he got the CEO job, right?
Mhm.
And Gillet was a phenomenal marketer. I couldn't help her with marketing. I could help her to be a better executive. She was also incredibly good at strategy, like, picking A or B, what should we do? She was really good at thinking through those things. So by giving her a role more in the hill figure outing versus the hill taking,
Mhm.
she turned out to, to hone her skills there as well. Right. So I think it's giving people more responsibility, more opportunity to solve problems. The problem is when people want a bigger position and they want more problems to solve because they're getting bored with the job. Like a good example here, somebody told me once was The Karate Kid. Did you ever see that movie?
I watched the music video.
Well, in the early days, the Karate Kid, he's wax on, wax off. He's waxing a car and then he's painting a fence. And he's like really bored painting the fence and waxing the car. And the mentor, the old,
Mhm.
karate guru, he's like, why am I waxing the car and painting the fence? And he shows him how those are like karate moves,
Oh,
this,
wow.
and, and like this.
Mhm.
And then he gives him a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So he keeps his education going by giving him more to do, starting with the very basics. And so a good manager has to continue to challenge the employees and give them more to do. The problem arises when the person can't handle the responsibility you've already gave them. So if you're not good at painting the fence or waxing on or waxing off, how can I give you more karate skills if you can't do the basics?
Mm.
And so managers have to have frank conversations with people saying, listen, I would love to give you more responsibility, but you can't handle the responsibility I already gave you. You are not knocking this job out of the park enough for me to put more on your plate. I need you to eat what you have before I give you more, right?
I wonder, so for the core employee, like how do you find them? Is that from oDesk? I'm sorry, but is it from your own platform or like was it just like from like a normal job posting? Were they like friend of friends or like how do you kind of recruit the like 5 core people that you have at the very beginning?
So it was a combination, a lot of it was network.
Mhm.
We did successfully use recruiters for some key positions. So like in the early days, we hired a VP of engineering, leveraging Riviera Partners in the Bay Area. I think they're very good at engineering talent. And they helped us out in the early days. That was a successful hire. So, I think it's all of the above. It's network, it's recruiters, it's job postings. It was our own platform. We were like 3-to-1 remote workers to permanent workers. But when we hired engineers, we were able to give them more responsibility. We were able to hire exceptional engineers because we said, listen, you're going to be writing some code, but you're going to be more like an architect and you're going to be managing a team of remote workers. So I'm going to give you skills that are going to be more relevant in the future. So yes, you're going to be also coding, but you're also going to be managing a team of remote workers. And that's going to be a unique and desirable skill in the near term. And as it turns out, during the pandemic, that turned out to be a really valuable skill, right? So our engineers, we could afford to pay them more. Why? Because we leveraged remote workers to augment them. And 2, we could give them more responsibility and ask more out of them while giving them this personal professional growth and development. Not to mention impact. They could see that features they built could make an impact on starts, for example, right? So it was very measurable.
For sure. I wonder, so like one of my so like I'm a small angel investor in a company that's kind of like doing like a UpWork, but more educational in the African market. So basically the founder were like he traveled to Africa and then like he kind of like onboarded a lot of like developers onto the platform, and then basically essentially it's like American companies called like YC startups or something could just hire on top of the platform, and then they pay a certain amount of money, and then the developers, like, they're not fully skilled, but they're just like great raw talents, and then they were learning. So through like earning dollars from the developers that are like the startups that are paying. So basically, essentially, it's like a lot cheaper than the US market. But on the other hand, they could just like the Africa developers can get an education. Also, like, also like the YC startups can get like stuff done. Basically, that's kind of the concept. And I wonder, like, what would you see were like the challenge of like being, just like having raw talent instead of like the existing talent, or do you feel like that's going to be like some sort of like shift towards everybody has to educate themselves anyway, because it's like the AI is kind of changing a lot of things?
Yeah. Tell me if I don't nail the answer, if you want something else. But like there was a platform, Amazon in the early days had this platform, Mechanical Turk. Do you remember this?
No.
Oh, it was a very basic work platform. It was like you just needed a judgment. You just needed like categorization. Like you could look at something and say, I want you to tell me, what is the disposition of this tweet? Or what is I want you to go and like get me the phone numbers for all of the stores in San Francisco. Or, it was a very basic task that had to be done by a human. And you would put up a job saying, this is what I want. And you would pay 3 cents per task. And somebody could grab that and do that task. So it's very task-based. And if you look at that today, that's all AI now. You don't need that platform anymore. So that you can have like the basic level of work that can be done before it's automated. Think about autonomous driving. In the early days, it was just cruise control. And then it was lane assist. And then it's automatic braking. And now, I was in San Francisco last night and I saw all these Waymos zipping around. And even though I've like been around for a while, I still freak out when I see a car go by with no driver and it's doing a great job. I saw one shift lanes yesterday in a pretty tight spot. I was like, man, that was an aggressive move, like it gets better and better. And so work starts at the, first it has to get atomized, right? Broken into a smaller chunk, and then it's augmented. It's a human and some AI, and then ultimately it's automated. Autonomous driving started with smaller, just 5 square blocks in San Francisco. Now it's all San Francisco. Then it could be all California. So these platforms that are training the workers, mechanical work in the early days was great for workers. People could make money. They could do basic tasks. It could be a stay-at-home mom just in her spare time, doing menial work that was adding value for somebody. Right. And so I think these platforms are good. There was a woman by the name of Lila Chenoweth. Do you remember Lila Jinnah? She started a company called Sama Source and changed it to Sama, but it was providing work in Africa for companies to, hire these workers to do just above Mechanical Turk, but below UpWork. Are there jobs you could outsource, and could you give it to communities in Africa that could do it in a call center or in a thing? And she built a really nice business providing Africans for work and work for Africans. So I think they're meaningful platforms. They're hard to get big because you've got to get a client, manage the workers, train the workers. There's a lot of hand-holding in between, right?
For sure. How do you minimize those hand-holding in between?
I guess you have to, I've mentioned hamsterware a couple of times. There's a hamster on a wheel keeping a light on. And then you have to figure out what are the manual pieces that are the most onerous, what's taking the most human power, and what can be automated or at least augmented. Can you is there, a rudimentary tool you can enable that could help the worker to be more efficient so they could accomplish more, right? And then could you automate that? Can you turn that into AI so that the human's not even doing it anymore? So it's a matter of seeing where is the friction and then removing the friction until you get further and further down the line of what can be automated and what's human. And so in the early days, I like hamsterware. I think it's a great way to see what do the clients really want, what works, what doesn't work. And then over time, what processes can be automated. And that's one of the things that Matt Cooper was really good at, which I think it's fitting he's running Skillshare. Why? Because, that company has a lot of those elements, right?
Since you were in sales before running oDesk, what did you identify as your unfair advantage, and how do you kind of leverage your unfair advantage to run the company?
So in a company, I wouldn't really call it sales. I would call it advocacy. And sales has changed. I don't know if you remember, I've talked about this a lot lately, but in the old days, people used to say that person's a great salesperson. They could sell ice to Eskimos. And so 40 years ago, selling ice to Eskimos was considered a good thing. Today, that would be considered a horrible thing. Why? Well, the world has moved to SaaS. And if somebody buys something, they've got to renew it next year. And if they're not using it, they're not going to renew it. Or if you sell something, if I sold something to you that you didn't like or didn't use, would you ever buy anything from me again? No. You would feel cheated. And in this world, your reputation and the ice to Eskimos used to be a good thing. Now it's a bad thing, right? So advocacy is your ability to convince others that this is the way to go, that this is the thing that we should be doing. So what I always rewarded was good advocacy. Right? It's people that had an opinion and could back it up with data. And it wasn't Excel manipulation. It wasn't like, look, if we do this, we're going to get that. It was like, give me the facts, prove it to me. And in this world today, it's just a lot easier to prove things. It's not about being really good at picking the thing that you think is going to work. It's about putting something up quickly and validating whether or not it's going to work and then building it. So in this world, we can try things so much easier. It's really about MVP. Create a culture where people can try stuff and validate that it's going to work and then actually implement it. Now, that gets a lot harder if things are irreversible. One thing we wrestled with for years was modifying our price. But to modify our price in the platform, it's really hard to try it. Why? Because so many things hung off a price. You would have to change so much of the app in order to try it. And so we we probably waited too long to modify price because it was irreversible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I don't know if I answered your question there. I may have gone off on a tangent, but I think it's a valuable lesson in creating an environment, a culture that isn't afraid of actually trying and validating things quickly, iterating quickly to validate that something will work.
What if an employee that just like tried to validate so many things and then like nothing worked from this person? Would you just fire them, or like how do you navigate that?
Well, I think, cream tends to rise to the top, and there's some people who are like really loud and vocal about, they're so convinced that this is going to work and that's going to work. And they're just sort of like bullies for getting it done, as opposed to like, the quiet competence. Let me give you an example here. We hired a guy out of Netflix. His name was Sean Kane. And Sean joined and he took a pretty significant product role at oDesk. And we gave Sean 150 features that were in the funnel to be built, that clients were asking for and people on the team wanted, et cetera. And Sean said, great, give me 30, 60 days. I'm going to weed through this list and I'll come back to you and I'll present what I think the priority should be. So we hired Sean, not necessarily we wanted him to get stuff done, but we also wanted him to pick the right things in the right priority order. We wanted somebody who had experience to help us with that. So Sean went away and he came back in 45 days and he said, can I present to the leadership team? I have a presentation I put together. And Sean walked in and he said, at Netflix, we had a feature called Movie Trailer Viewer. And so we wanted to build a movie trailer viewer because we thought it would help our metric of movies in queue. How do we get people to put more movies in queue? If they put more movies in queue, they last longer. Their subscription is longer. It helps our retention. Which one should we build? A lightweight version of movie trailer viewer, a medium, or a full? And everybody was arguing what they thought they should do for movie trailer viewer. Should it be a lightweight where I just show you the movies and you can't change, like the movie theater? You sit there and they show you and that's it. Medium was you could skip, you could back, you could forward. Full was you pick what you want to watch your trailer for and they do it. And then Sean was telling us the story and then he had a slide. He said, which one of these put more movies in queue? Lightweight, show of hands. Medium, show of hands. Full, show of hands. His next slide said none of the above. And he said, how did we know this? Because we built A/B testing infrastructure. He says, therefore, the first thing that we should build is A/B testing infrastructure. We shouldn't build any of these 150 features until we have a testing infrastructure that can validate whether or not this was a good thing or not. Any questions? And the entire executive team went, we hired the right guy. Right. So none of our features were the right features to build. The right priority was, before we have testing infrastructure, we shouldn't be building any of this because we're just wasting our time because we can't measure. So that's an example of good prioritization, right? Of building the right thing. And Sean, UpWork went public. I was there to ring the bell, which was a phenomenal experience. Stefan Casriel, who I hired to run product, was the CEO at the time who took the company public. Hayden Brown, who I also hired, is running the company today. I'm incredibly proud of the legacy and the employees that we hired who 10 years later are still running the company, right? But Stefan, at the IPO, was any employee had been with the company 10 years, and Sean Kane was there to ring the bell with me, right? So not only it's an example, Grace, to your question. Good ones rise to the top and will stay. Why? Because they're continually given positions of leadership more and more in order to make an impact, right? And if you're not, you should go somewhere where you can. If our culture isn't providing you the opportunity to do that, you should go down the street where you can check more of your boxes, right?
I love that. Want to quickly say hi to the audience. Hi, Greg. Hi, Mohammed. So I wonder, so like when it comes to running the company or like scaling the company at the beginning, maybe you have like a few core employee like Sean, like everybody else who are building the infrastructure, building the A/B testing, building like a good company culture. When it comes to scaling, like what were some lessons that you learned to scale a company fast, but also not losing, the core company culture as well as like just like, the ability to function in like a high speed?
It's a really good question. I often say jungle, dirt road, highway, right? These are the stages of a company. And if we're in the jungle, what do you need? Well, you need people with a machete in each hand who are helping to blaze the trail, right? So they're really good with machetes. They don't mind mosquitoes. It's hot. They're sweating. It's dirty. There's not a shower every night. When you start to get onto the dirt road, maybe you still need a couple of machetes, but now you need a Jeep, right? And when you're on the highway, what do you need? You need an Escalade or Mercedes. I don't know, something luxury, right? That goes fast and at high speed. And so a key lesson is recognizing that there are people that are good at all of these stages of the company. And one of our guys came to us once who was a phenomenal jungle guy. He was really, really good in the jungle. But as the company scaled, he was taking shortcuts. He still had two machetes in the Jeep, And when he came to me one day and said he was going to leave, my first inclination was to talk him into staying, because how are we going to survive without this guy who was so good in the jungle? But after a couple of minutes of me asking him, why is he leaving? I realized it was time for him to go. And the reason it was time for him to go was because we were close to 100 people and he was good at a 20-person, 30-person firm, maybe up to 100. And he was going to a smaller startup to do what he had done for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so an important lesson to your question is recognizing where are you on the journey and where is your team on the journey and what are they good at and what do they want? And can you provide that to them? And can they scale to that? And that process requires some tough decisions. It requires you to let some people go, hire over some people who have been incredibly valuable on the journey so far. And I had to do that multiple times. And a good lesson here for me was watching Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. Mark had an early COO. It was a guy by the name of Owen Van Natta, who was a Microsoft and Amazon guy. He was like very senior, very seasoned. He was the adult in the room. And Owen was very poised and did a great job. I think he was there when they raised $15 billion at a $15 billion valuation from Microsoft. But Mark replaced Owen with Sheryl Sandberg, right? So it's not that Owen couldn't scale the company to 20, 30, 50 billion. It's just that Sheryl could take it all the way, right? And so that's a lesson in, it's not that the person isn't good. It's like, could you skate where the puck is going? Could you be doing better? And are you going to have the people to get the company to the next level, right? And that was the team. When I left the company, obviously the team was in place to get the company to the next level because they're still there today, right? So, or many of them are still there today.
For sure. I want to be mindful of the time. Obviously, I really love all the lessons that you've shared about hiring, about like just building a team, as well as like building an amazing platform. I want to end with like a quick 1-minute fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
Oh my gosh. I loved Phil Knight's book, Shoe Dog.
Oh, I love that one.
That was just such a good book and so well written for, apparently he took classes at Stanford to learn, he took literature classes to be a better writer before he wrote the book. But anyway, I put that high up on the list.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Oh my gosh. So many people. Can I invite many people? I mean, I would love to have
It's your party.
Phil Knight, Obama, my wife, like lots of people, but good friends, good conversation. I think I'm a good middler, so I don't need a middler. I need to fill in.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
So many people. One is I was fortunate enough to work with Reed Hastings, who ran Pure Software and then went on to co-found Netflix with my good friend Mark Randolph. And I learned so many valuable lessons from Reed. Also, a guy by the name of John Lovett, who was at Rational Software, was really tough on me, but he was a great mentor. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons from John that I really appreciate today, despite the fact he was a tough guy to work for at the time.
Where can we find you outside of work?
I live in the town of Atherton, California, here in the Bay Area. We have a little beach house in Santa Cruz. I love to surf. And so I try and get down there 2 days a week, even weekdays.
Wow, it's cold though.
The water's cold, but the weather's so nice. It's 65 degrees. I was there on Sunday and it was just beautiful, like 65 degrees, sunny. And, the water's cold, but they have great wetsuits nowadays. So you can find me in Santa Cruz or outdoors. I love anything outdoors, biking, little pickleball, working out, hiking, whatever.
Wow. I want to maybe end with one question. It's like, so nowadays, like you are advising a lot of startups. What were like maybe one thing that nobody asked you, but you feel like people should know?
What's one thing that nobody asked me that people should know? Boy, that's really good. This is a tough one, Grace. I think it could be stuff that we've already talked about. It could be the hiring lesson, I think, is really important. I find myself talking about that a lot. Hire for personal characteristics and motivation, not skill and knowledge. I feel like that's a mistake a lot of people make. And the second thing we also talked about, it's understanding the motivation of your employees and making sure that for the good ones, that you're checking as many of those boxes as you can. And just to repeat them, it's the people, right? Who are the people that they're working with? It's the job itself. Are you excited about what you're doing? Right. And then it's about impact, growth and development, financial reward, and balance. And just having an understanding of what's important to somebody and whether or not you're checking those boxes will give you insight as a leader as to whether or not somebody may leave. Right. So you may lose one of your valuable employees because they're not having enough of their boxes checked. Now, for the employees who aren't producing, maybe you don't care as much. For the ones who are, you want to keep them. You want to make sure that you're checking as many of those boxes as possible. And maybe it's not a promotion or more compensation, but it could be more responsibility. It could be inviting them into more decisions. It could be inviting them into more strategy and less if they feel like they're always doing. Maybe you invite them in to help figure out which of these features should we build next, right? So I think there's ways to align those things more than you realize. It's not always about the comp or the promotion.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Gary. I feel like those are some really great leadership lessons and appreciate you. Thank you again. Let me quickly end stream. Let me